Hello, everyone. As you're coming in, please let us know where you're tuning in from. We'll get started in a few seconds, as soon as we have everyone here. Yeah, please go ahead and tell us where you're tuning in from this evening. I'll just drop a link in the chat for the book. It's like we have someone from Chicago, someone from the Bronx. Someone from Hartford. All right, we'll go ahead and get started. Hi, I'm Omar Acevedo, and I'm the Literary Program Coordinator at the Mark Twain House and Museum in Hartford, Connecticut. And I'm delighted to host tonight's program for Happily, a Personal History with Fairy Tales. First, I need to thank our sponsors. Our virtual programs are produced in part with support honoring the late Frank Lord. We are happy to honor his memory with these programs, and we are also incredibly grateful to the Wish Well Foundation and Connecticut Public WNPR for supporting all of our virtual programs. As a nonprofit organization, the Mark Twain House and Museum depends on contributions to share our enriching author programs like Happily, education initiatives, and other events with our community. If you can, please consider donating. I'll provide a link for that in the chat once I finish my introduction. Now, tonight we are welcoming Sabrina Orah Mark and Rabbi Donna Berman for a discussion of Happily, a memoir in essays which reimagines the modern fairy tale, turning it inside out and searching it for the wisdom to better understand our contemporary moment. Our author, Sabrina Orah Mark, is an award-winning fiction writer and poet who has written the column Happily for the Paris Review since 2018. Raised in Brooklyn, New York, Mark earned a BA from Barnard College, Columbia University. She also earned an MFA from the Iowa Writers Workshop and a PhD in English from the University of Georgia. She is the author of the poetry collections Simsum and The Babies, winner of the Saturnalia Book Prize. Her collection of stories, Wild Milk, won the Georgia Author of the Year Award for Short Story and was a finalist for the Townsend Prize for Fiction. Mark's accomplishments include a National Endowment for the Arts Fellowship, a Sustainable Arts Foundation Award, a fellowship from the Fine Arts Work Center, and a Creative Capital Award. Our moderator, Rabbi Donna Berman, is the executive director of the Charter Oak Cultural Center. Donna is known as one of the region's most moving speakers and visionary leaders. She has touched thousands of lives through her work at the Charter Oak. Rabbi Donna holds a PhD in religion and social ethics from Drew University. At the core of her theology is the commitment to the Jewish tradition of tikkun olam, repairing the world through acts of justice. This is a commitment that she brings to her work at Charter Oak. Now, we encourage you to have a conversation in the chat as Sabrina and Rabbi Donna are having their conversation. If you have a specific question, you can post that directly into our Q&A section. You'll find that at the bottom of this screen, closer to the left. And you can also click on live transcript or captions to see live auto captioning for the program. Finally, and perhaps most importantly, I have put the link in the chat to purchase Happily through our museum store. Your purchase will support our museum and our honored guest. Now that's enough for me. Please sit back and enjoy the program, and I'll turn this over to Sabrina and Donna.
Thanks, Omar. Hi, everybody. We're so happy you could join us tonight. Sabrina, it is so lovely to meet you. As I said to you before, I feel like I know you because I've been spending so much time inside your wonderful brain reading.
Well, It's wonderful to be here. And I could feel, I felt you inside my brain. So
I hope that was a good thing. Congratulations on the publication of Happily. I think it was just published last week, right?
thank you. Thank
Yeah.
you. Yes. It's a real live book now. So
it's a real live book with a very beautiful cover that we'll talk about in a couple of minutes. I love the book, and it's really an honor to meet you and to be able to talk with you. You have a brilliant and fascinating way of thinking about things. And it felt to me like in reading this book, I was rummaging through your very expansive mind. So please tell us something about your life and how you came to love words and fairy tales and poetry.
Well, it's so good to be here. I'm very excited for this conversation. We were talking a little bit before, and I feel like, already very much at home. So, I came to fairy tales very late. I actually barely read fairy tales as a child. I actually, but I did spend a lot of time as a kid, because I was brought up Orthodox and I went to a yeshiva. We spent a good portion of the day, reading the Torah. And so in a way, the stories of the Torah in terms of like miracles, right? Like the animals talking, those questions of jealousy and abandonment and wandering and brokenness, like all of those stories are really a kind of fairy tale. And so that was my favorite part of the day, just kind of like engaged in these stories where like some, God can speak to you from a burning bush, right? Like this to me was so incredibly delightful. And, I remember, if you drop a book, you kiss its spine because when you pick it up, almost to, like say to the book, are you okay? So sorry, there's a big helicopter suddenly flying over. But you would kiss its spine as if it was a body, right? To almost like soothe it. And so from very early on, I had this relationship to the word and to the book itself as if it was a kind of body you can care for. Like it was a very kind of like physical and emotional relationship that I had to the book, to words, to the idea of words as these sorts of like living things. And I almost at times I'm shocked that like not every single person I went to school with became a poet. Because there was such a deep interaction with like story and the word as a kind of spell or as a kind of prayer or as a kind of like possible miracle. And the sense that like language is in fact like really transformative, right? Like you can say something and make something happen, and so you have to be very careful with what you say.
Like let there be light.
Like right, exactly. Like let there be light. Exactly right. And that like an utterance is a kind of like an utterance is a kind of spell. Yeah.
In the book, you talk about Tzimtzum, about God contracting God's self to allow the world to breathe, which, yes. First of all, from a parenting perspective, how instructive is that? Yes. But that God, like a mother, you say, fills these vessels with light, and that and then they burst. God's light is so bright and so strong that the vessels break, and little shards of God's light are implanted in every living being. It seems to me, from what you just said and from reading the book, that is something that you see, that a book could be living, and even inanimate things, that a book can be living, that you see life in everything. Is that true?
Yeah, I think I remember when I was in graduate school, I have this wonderful friend who's a poet, Oni Buchanan. She's this extraordinary pianist and poet. And I remember we would go back and forth and we would like make everything speak. And so we would, like, the corner of a table, like, what would the corner of a table sounds like? Or she had a stick that she kept on the dashboard of her car, which, like, which we talked about so often. It became this kind of thing that could speak to us. And I think it's about listening. Like, I think also I'm always like first a poet. And I think that idea of like listening really, really carefully to the worlds, right? Like, if you listen to something, it will start talking back to you. And so in Happily, there's this, the Mavis the tarantula, who, is my stepdaughter's dear tarantula, and I did not want that tarantula living in the house with us. And I was very unhappy about this tarantula. And then I figured, okay, fine, she's living in the house with us. Like, I'm going to learn about tarantulas. I am going to accept Mavis somehow. And I remember like watching these videos about tarantulas and molting and like all the things that a tarantula is capable of doing. And like, the more I listened and the more I kind of looked at Mavis, even from far away, because I was always like a little bit, I guess, frightened of her, she started teaching me things, that in the way that I kind of look towards the fairy tale as something that I didn't quite yet understand, that I didn't know very well, for the fairy tale to teach me, to sort of guide me. It was the same with Mavis the tarantula, who kind of was also like her own fairy tale. And, by the end of Happily, like, she is one of, the big spiritual guides of the journey. And I think it was also in the act of writing about her. The act of writing makes you listen very, very hard. Like, you think you're talking, but you're actually listening. Yeah.
That's so interesting. And actually, in the essay called "We Break It, You Fix It," you break it, we fix it.
You break it, you break it, we fix it.
Fix it. Didn't that essay end with you in the parking lot with a crow?
With a crow, yes, yeah.
And the crow said, "Listen," and you said, and you sat there and you listened.
Yes.
Yeah. Who fostered this amazing imagination that you have? Or does it just come from some deep place inside you?
I think it was I think it was adaptive in many ways to sort of like find, I was, a very, very, very shy, very quiet child. And I think it was, I think that I needed these a kind of friendship with a lot of things that maybe weren't people for a long time as a kid. So I think that was part of it. My great aunt is an incredible storyteller, and I always like love so much. She's a Holocaust survivor, and I just like love so much like how she would tell me these stories. And I remember as a kid, she and she also has this like very deep relationship to like the object world as these kinds of, you know, as a thing that can be broken and then maybe saved. And so I'll just tell this little story. My great aunt had brought with her, she had lived in Vienna, and they were able to escape. Her mom, her brother, and her father were able to escape, and she brought with her this Viennese porcelain doll, which was essentially kind of like a cheap, almost like a cheap plasticky type material. It was some, and she referred to it as this porcelain doll. And when I was a kid, she gave it to me, and and it was wrapped in newspaper, and it was wrapped in newspaper that was on the newspaper it was the same date that we unwrapped it, except that it was 1945. So it was the same date. Oh, so it was like, I don't exactly remember, but let's say it was like March 8th, no, it would have been earlier. I'm sorry, March 8th, like 1938, actually, or 1939. And then we unwrapped it March 8th, 1981. And we brought, and we unwrapped it. And when we unwrapped it, like the face was shattered. And there was like an arm that had kind of fallen off and a leg that had fallen off. And we went to this doll hospital together. I remember we like took the bus to the doll hospital on Lexington Avenue in Manhattan to like get this doll repaired, to like bring all of her broken pieces, you know, from this other world to get repaired. And she just always was, she just gave me a kind of language to like speak to a world that like you just need one extra level of listening to hear. Yeah.
So quite an inspiration to you.
Yes. Yeah.
You know, it's interesting listening to you because the way I describe your book is delightful, delicious, and dark. But there's a real hopefulness in you, the way that you put things together in this conversation. It's a little bit different than the tone of the book. Which, do you hear that too? Does that resonate at all?
You mean in terms of the dark part, or is it?
Yeah, as I kind of said to you, your middle name is Orah, which means light, and it seems to me that you are always shedding light on the dark, hidden places in you, in the world, and you help us do it for ourselves, I think, in this book. But in this conversation, there's just there's a joy in you that feels, it feels a little bit different. In fact, I was thinking about the title of the book, Happily, because you talk a lot in the book about things being inside other things, like Little Red Riding Hood, the wolf is wearing the grandmother's clothes, and things are hidden. And I think in some way that the title Happily hides the depth of some of the painful things that you're talking about.
Yeah. It's it's funny because I saw somebody had written somewhere, I thought that this book would be less dark than it was. I should have more closely looked at the cover of the woman, you know, in the boat with the oar for a hand. And I think that you know, I think that her name is Millie. I know we were going to talk about this a little bit later, but like the cover of the book was something. I mean, when I saw Amy Cutler's Millie, I was like, please let her be on the book. I want her to be the cover of this book so badly. And I think a big part of it is that tone that you're talking about, where there is a kind of, you know, let's say, I guess, the sense of a happily, right? Like she's in a boat and it's a little bit weird, but she's wearing the boat, but she is the boat. And there's a kind of like, let's say, whimsical quality to it. But as you look closer to her, she has an oar for a hand. So she is possibly, you know, trapped inside of this boat, being part boat herself. But then there's also the hope in the fact that she is the boat. She is actually the boat that can take her wherever she wants to go. You know, like she's the vehicle of her own journey, right? So that there's that sense of like, if you just keep listening and get closer and closer, you can kind of like have the humor, right, and the darkness and the levity, like all you know, living and breathing together, because there is no happily really without unhappily. And you know, and then of course, like also throughout the book, there's, you know, my mom, who is often like the poetic foil. You know, she's the rug that gets pulled out from under the, you know, I don't want to say the hopefulness of what I try to say, but maybe the naivete inside of the hopefulness.
Well, and you are so funny. I mean, it's really, some of it is laugh out loud funny. And one of the funny lines, of course, is one of the names of one of the chapters. Fuck the bread, the bread is over. Would you say something about, then that's a line that your mom said to you?
Yeah. So I mean, it was, so it was May, right, of 2020. And I was freaking out because I make challah every Shabbat with my kids, and we could not find any bread flour. And I was like, you know, obsessing about that. And she just was like, you know, fuck the bread is over, like just move on. There's a lot of like, get up. And my husband always says we choose our parents, you know, whenever. And I think in many ways, like my mother and I, my mother and I are very different in a lot of ways, but I think somewhere inside me spiritually, like I knew I needed to have some kind of mother, my mother, who would say like, get up and like keep moving forward. Like it's just, you know, like this is reality here. Like you have a lot of the unreal. And you know, when I in the acknowledgements, I basically was like, thank you for keeping me real, to my mom. But what's funny with the fuck the bread line is that she said to me, I did not say fuck the bread. I would never say that. And now I have to tell the rabbi, you know, she's like telling the rabbi, I didn't say that, I don't curse. And and you know, the essay, like the essay ended up like hitting a nerve with a lot of people. So people were texting my brothers, did your sister write this? Like, is that your sister? Because they recognized not me, but my mother. They were like, I know that your mother would exactly say this. So it was, yeah.
Yeah, it's a great essay. I mean, your writing is so gorgeous. It is so gorgeous. And I wanted to just read a little quote and ask you a little bit about it. You said, "We turn to fairy tales not to escape, but to go deeper into a terrain we've inherited, the vast and muddy terrain of the human psyche. Fairy tales are homemade stories turned inside out. You can see the threads, the stitching line, the seams. Sometimes a needle is still attached to a loose thread hanging." In your description, fairy tales as they uncover the vast and muddy terrain of the human psyche sounds a lot like therapy. So you kind of intimated this before. Writing these essays is a little bit like therapy for you, and or have you done so much inner work that they are the product of that?
Mm.
And again, both can be true.
Yeah, you know, it's so right when I got this column, around the same time, my grandmother died, and she and I were incredibly close. And I would go to her house, you know, to visit her, and we would sit at her kitchen table, and and I remember it would, you know, it would be like early in the morning, and the sun would like rise, and we would be like sitting in, you know, and the sun would start pouring in through the window, and she'd wear these big sunglasses, and then it would get like darker and darker, and we would just sit and talk for 1,000 hours, just like 1,000 hours. That's what we did. And it's really interesting to me because when my grandmother died around the same time, I started writing this column because Nadja Spiegelman, who had been at the Paris Review, after publishing one of my essays, asked me if I would want to do, you know, to write this column. And it was almost as if like my grandmother wasn't here anymore, but like somehow the table, the column became the table my grandmother and I sat at, you know, that I didn't have anymore. And it's so weird how, like, you know, we lose things, and we lose people we love, and they like return to us in these like different forms. We just have to, I don't know. I think she returned to me in this other form where like I had this space to speak. And now I'm forgetting your question, but oh yeah. So I think, you know, yes, like the essays became these places where I felt like I could say anything. And the things that I had been before too afraid to write about, suddenly it was like this safe space of this monthly column. I was writing with the moon, you know, it would like, I would start freaking out every month that I had nothing to write about. I wasn't going to be able to do it. My friend Amy Margolis said to me, like, here we go again, because I would start texting her, you know, like, I don't have anything to write about. I'm not going to be able to do this. She's like, this has been going on for now 20 months, every single month. It's the same, like, you're not going to be able to do it. You have nothing to say. Okay, you found something to say, it's not working. And then by the end of the month, you know, like I would, it was really like writing with the moon, and it was also like still being at that table with my grandmother. I mean, Nadja Spiegelman there would be no Happily had it not been for her. She gave me this space. She is an incredible, incredible editor. And I felt safe that like she wouldn't put anything out that was in any way would hurt me, would hurt anybody I loved. Like I really, it was a great working relationship. I mean, and she's just, it's a gift of a human being. So yeah, so in that way, yes, like writing these essays, I learned things about myself that I hadn't known at all. Like I figured out how to kind of speak inside of those like scary places. So yeah.
You know, I can only imagine what it meant to your grandmother to talk to you for 1,000 hours, because I told you I'd like to do that too.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. Who has influenced your writing? I wrote down here that there are some notes like wine connoisseurs say, notes of Cynthia Ozick perhaps, and you quote Gertrude Stein. Do those women influence you? Are there other people?
Yes,
What's your lineage?
My lineage. Oh boy. So definitely Cynthia Ozick and Gertrude Stein. I mean, Gertrude Stein in a big, big way. I mean, I remember reading Tender Buttons and thinking like, oh my God, she did that thing. She's done this thing where she's and this goes back a little bit to what I was talking about with like the language as an object, right? Like language as a kind of body that you could hold. Like there's something about Tender Buttons that I've always thought of as like her taking words and cracking them open and letting the meaning spill out and just like leaving all the shells of the words like scattered everywhere, almost like a kind of seam, like almost like, these sorts of like shards of light without there. Rather than having the light in Gertrude Stein, I think we have sort of the shattered vessels everywhere, and that to me was really, really exciting. And, and she's mischievous and, she was, a lesbian Jew living in Paris, as like the Nazis were invading, like it's just incredible, like how she survived in many ways. Donald Barthelme is a major influence. There was a point where my copy of his 60 stories was so falling apart, like I had to carry it, I had to put rubber bands around it, and there was a point, I think, where I was so deeply influenced by him and his I love his sense of humor so much. But I thought like I gotta put the Bartholomew down, like there's Bruno Schultz is, I write about Bruno Schultz, but he this was when I think it was my first collection of poems, The Babies, came out. In a review, somebody wrote, she must sleep with Kafka under her pillow and Bruno Schultz. And I thought like, oh, I know this Kafka guy. I know that guy, but like, who's Bruno Schultz? And then I was like, wait, Bruno Schultz. And I went to my bookshelf and I had The Strait of Crocodiles. And not only did I have The Strait of Crocodiles, but I opened it up and I had read it and I had copious notes all over, and notes in the margins. And I read that book and it went into my bones so deeply that I
Yeah.
couldn't even remember it. It was like it went past my memory. And so
And we should
that,
say The Street of Crocodiles is a book by Cynthia Ozick.
okay, right. Yes. So like we're
We're
all
both there,
right.
yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like you start plotting all the coordinates and it's like the shapes that it makes is just really, I mean, so exciting to me. You know, Samuel Beckett also is another writer, Grace Paley. I just did a panel on Grace Paley at a writing writing conference that I was at, and the woman who was moderating had this had been very good friends with Grace Paley, and she was a deep influence to her, and she was sitting there and talking about Grace Paley, and her copy of her Grace Paley was so weather worn that as she was talking, it was literally shedding onto her lap. And I didn't want to say anything. And then finally I was like, okay, that is like Grace Paley is snowing like into like through the whole room, right? Like it's just like this Grace Paley snowstorm of like these ancient pages. It was so wonderful. But then she said, that's enough. You're making too much out of this. But I mean, I think that is also another thing that I like to do, which is make too much out of things. Yeah.
I don't think you can do too much of that. Because you do it.
I agree. I actually agree. Yeah.
There's a real I feel like you really get the sacredness of everything.
Oh.
I feel like if somebody tuned in right now, they think that you're the rabbi.
Oh, thank you. That's like
really
the highest compliment. Thank you.
Yeah, you really, I love the way you see the world. I love the way you see the world. Now, in the book, you talk about a lot of hard things. You talk about coronavirus. You talk about all kinds of things. And one of the most difficult things you talk about is race. And as you mentioned before, you have two sons who are Black, and your essay "Fairy Tales in the Bodies of Black Boys" it's just a kind of an extraordinary and very creative account of what it is to give the speech, so to speak. That parents give to their children of color about how to behave with the police and what to do so that, God forbid there should be an act of violence. And you write, by the way, we have a 1619 project discussion group every Wednesday. And I read this excerpt from your book last week to our group about the speech. But you write, as my sons grow, the American imagination grows around them like water hemlock, poisonous and hollow. My son's skin is light, so the hemlock may not grow as thick as it would for a darker boy.
Yeah. I mean, I think in many ways, and we were talking about this a little bit earlier too, but in many ways, and maybe in all the ways, I started writing these essays, partly out of trying to remember, but also thinking like, my boys are Black and Jewish. We're living in Georgia. This is not where I come from. My husband and I come from very different places in many ways, and then in like exactly the same place in other ways. And then I thought, what the hell are we going to do? Like, I'm actually scared. And and the only thing I really know how to do is write, and tell stories. And so I started writing these essays as if writing them could be some kind of, garments they can wear to protect them, some kind of armor. And so that almost to teach myself how to find a language so that I can give them that language somehow, and they're going to have to find their own language too, but that I could somehow, but if I was just tongue-tied all the time, then how could I expect them to find for themselves a language to help them navigate a world that is often not on their side? And, I was a kid who I felt, very protected in the way that, like, yes, my mom's side of the family were Holocaust survivors, but like that part was over. Like, they were survivors, right? Like, there was a sense that like everything now is okay. That was the sense I had as a kid, that horrible things had once happened, but that was in the past. And of course, like, that isn't the case. But I did have a sense of safety. My kids don't. Like, they, and this is such a strange story, but every year here, I live in Athens, Georgia, and every year there's this like holiday parade. And Noah wanted to be in the parade. He wanted to be on the float. His school makes this float. He goes to a school that is like very heavy in the arts. And so like almost every year they win for most creative float or something. He was very excited about it. And the theme was, and they always have these sorts of like wacky, these creative themes. And the theme for their float was holiday apocalypse. Okay, fine. So and I think that, and so he decided he wanted to represent, he said, there's like, nobody ever represents Hanukkah. He's going to represent Hanukkah. Okay, so he designed a robot menorah costume that he was going to wear on this float. And for me and on the best of days, I'm very nervous about like children on floats and in parades, just like in general, I just but he really wanted to do this, and he was really excited, and he designed this costume. He made it. It was really cool. And I kept thinking, and he had like an enormous Jewish star in his forehead with like all this like menorah sort of I don't know, it was let's say it was like kind of abstract. It was an abstract interpretation. And about 20 minutes before he was supposed to get on this float to represent like the Jews of Athens, Georgia, I got like a Facebook text that there was a threat that there was going to be like a shooter at the parade. And so, I turned to my husband and I'm like, these are the decisions we have to make. This is crazy. So this is and it was, the police were notified, and they said that there was going to be like extra more police than they had originally planned on, and they were, and then a bunch of schools pulled pulled their floats. And eventually I just thought, like, he's not doing it. And so my husband went and picked him up. And you know, and then we're in this space of, and this is for all the kids, you know, like this is for all these kids growing up in this country, where I think so many parents, like whatever race, whatever religion you are afraid, are really, really scared. And you know, how do we answer? How do you say to your kid, like, you can't be on the float?
Oh. What was his reaction to the whole
He
thing?
was very, very upset, and their float, their school, they went ahead with the float. So he was more upset because he was worried for his friends. And then there was, you know, it ended up being fine. But, you know, he said to my husband at the end, like, thank you for protecting me. Like he was, yeah, like he was aware that we did it to protect him. But, you know, and whether I wanted to talk to him about, you know, I mean, in Happily, they're younger, and there is a point where, like, I don't talk about the school shootings, you know, but but by this episode, like, I had to. And so you're kind of, you know, yeah. And so I think yes, like, I think it's also good to, I want this book also in many ways to be this hand that reaches out, that says, like, I also have no answers for these impossible questions. Yeah.
Would you do us the honor of reading a section from that chapter, Fairy Tales in the Bodies of Black Boys?
Yes.
This is the beginning of the chapter, right? The essay.
Yes. And I'll just read that one page and a little bit more. Fairy Tales and the Bodies of Black Boys. Noah and I go to Target. He is carrying a little stuffed monkey, and as we walk through the automatic doors, he puts it under his shirt. No, no, I say. Bondo is shy, he says. I told him I'd keep him safe. No, no, I say. Under Noah's shirt, Bondo could be anything. He could be wild and alive. He could be something that doesn't belong to him. He could be a bouquet of flowers or a gun or a book of fairy tales about the bodies of Black boys. Why? He asks. Why? I answer, or I start saying something and then stop, or I say, because it isn't safe, or I say, I love you, or I say, here, let me hold him. A few days later, a friend posts on Facebook that her 9-year-old Black son is now riding his bike to the supermarket by himself. We have talked to him, she writes, about using a bag for the items he's bought, not his pockets, keeping his receipt in his hand as he leaves the store, keeping his hands out of his pockets while shopping, taking his hood off. I imagine it continuing. We have given him invisibility powder. We have made wings for him out of the feathers of ancient doves. We have given him the power to become a rain cloud and burst, if necessary, into a storm. You know, and I mean, and, you know, and I continue, you know, and I say, when I was a child, I could have hidden a house under my dress, and all I would have been was a girl with a house under her dress. You know, and I think, you know, I mean, to oversimplify, but sort of, you know, the unfairness of looking over at your own child and thinking, like, you know, I could have kept all the stuffed animals under my shirt and nobody would have said anything. And it's not safe for you to do that.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think we are going to soon move into the question and answer period. Is that right, Omar? Can I ask Sabrina one more question?
Yeah, doesn't look like we have any questions right now, but hopefully some questions will be asked. But yes, you can ask one more question, Donna.
Okay. Hard to decide which one more question, because again, the thousand hours of talking to you would be very appealing. But in the Kirkus, I guess that's how you say Kirkus review, the reviewer, and by the way, did they not tell you who did the review? There's like this.
No,
Is that true?
no.
I thought there was something wrong with me, that I missed something.
No, I think with Kirkus and I think with Publishers Weekly, they don't, I think both those reviews are not, yeah.
That's interesting, right?
Yeah.
So the reviewer warns the reader not to wolf down this book. Rather, the person says, sprinkle these clever essays like breadcrumbs through the forest of your days. And it's really a lovely line in keeping with the tone of your writing. So when people finish the book, when they finish sprinkling the breadcrumbs, is there a place you hope they'll find themselves that's different from where they started off before reading it?
Yeah, that's such a good question. I mean, I have been thinking a lot about, what it means to like write a book and put the book out into the world and what I kind of hope for the book. And I keep going back to this image of mana. I loved this idea of like mana, or like that, the heavenly bread that I learned about when I was a kid, where God rains down this mana, and it can taste like anything you want it to taste like, and you're not, and I remember learning like you would be punished if you take more than you need, but you would also be punished if you would take less than you need, which I didn't understand as a child, right? Like the idea of what does it mean to take like less than you need? And we all went around and we had to say like what we would want the mana to taste like. I think I said toasted marshmallows because that was like the delicacy of my childhood.
Some s'mores in the desert.
Oh my God. Yeah. And but I keep thinking of that, like, to in the way that fairy tales to me are a kind of mana. Like I remember searching, I would have this thing that would happen. And I would think, okay, I need to write about this and I need to find a fairy tale to accompany me on this journey of, writing about it. And it was like, almost like the fairy tale was a kind of mana, like it could taste like whatever you need it to taste like. If I needed to guide me, to find a way somehow to write about questions of like, is it okay to even write about something? Like there was a fairy tale for that. And so my hope is that, the book that happily can act in that way, even just in a small way, that it becomes a kind of and of course, like there's the irony of the fuck the bread essay, but that it is a kind of like, bread that you can make taste like what you want, you need it to taste like. And you shouldn't take more than you need, but you shouldn't take less. So yeah.
Beautiful. I think we have one question. Oh, the questions from, Liz. Hi, Liz. Sabrina, did your son read that chapter about fairy tales and the bodies of Black boys? If so, what reaction did he have?
So that he did not read that one. That one he has not read. The one that he actually has read or has heard me read is the Ghost People one. So that's earlier on in Happily, you know, and I write about him making these ghost people as almost like these little golems, as these like figures that he can take around to that I think he imagined for a long time as like these little figures that can protect him. I mean, we talk all the time about, you know, sort of we talk all the time about, you know, what it means to, you know, be a boy in this world. But for me, a lot of it is me listening to him and for him to tell me what it's like to be a boy in this world, not from, you know, for me to tell him. And so that's actually one essay that I haven't shared with him. I mean, there's quite a few that I haven't, but yeah, that one I haven't shared with him.
Did you want to read something from that chapter about
the ghost people?
Yeah.
I can read, let me see. Let's see. Yeah, I could read, I'll read the first 2 pages of it. My son's teacher pulls me aside to tell me she's concerned about Noah and the ghost people. Ghost people? Yes, she says. She is cheerful, though I suspect the main ingredient of her cheer is dread. Can you encourage Noah to stop bringing them to school? She is whispering, and she is smiling. She is a close talker and occasionally calls me girl, which embarrasses me. I don't know these ghost people. You do. I don't think so. He makes them out of the wood chips he finds on the playground. They're distracting him. He isn't finishing his sentences. Okay, I say. Ghost people. She smiles wide. One of her front teeth looks more alive than it should be. As a toddler, Noah had always had a superhero in one hand and a superhero in the other, like the world was a tightrope and the men were his balance pole. Now he makes his own men out of pipe cleaners and twigs and paper and Q-tips and string and band-aids, but mostly wood chips. I eavesdrop. With Noah there, the ghost people seem to speak a mix of cloud and wind. They are rowdy and kind. They comfort him. If Adam looked like anything in the beginning, I suspect it would be these wood chips, the color of dry earth. He too would be speaking in a language from a place that doesn't quite exist. But also, I know as Noah gets older, the world will make it even more difficult for him to carry these people around. For God's sake, says my mother, let him carry the freaking ghost people around. Who is he hurting? Maybe himself, I say. Why himself, she asks. How himself? They're distracting him, I explain. From what? From his sentences. Who the hell cares, says my mother.
Just amazing. Just amazing. Sabrina, I think, Omar, I see your face, so it must be time for us to finish up. But what a delight to be with you. What a delight to listen to you. Really, the light that shines from you is so brilliant.
Oh, thank you. This has been just incredible. And I do feel like we could definitely keep talking for 1,000 hours. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, I know where to find you. And I thank you so much for your work, which is so inspiring, and for just the beauty of your being.
Oh,
Blessings to
thank
you.
you. Thank you so much. Thank you. And thank you, Omar.
Yes, thank you so much, Sabrina. And thank you so much, Donna, for moderating tonight's program. So I dropped a link in the chat to buy Sabrina's book through our museum store. I'll put it in again. So you can snag it before we end the program. So please buy the book. And plunge into Sabrina's world. So we'll close out for this evening. Before we go, I just want to say, please join us for future programs. We are actually having our new exhibit opening on Thursday. So if you're within driving distance of the museum, on Thursday, March 23rd from 5:30 to 7:30, we'll have the grand opening reception for our brand new exhibit For Business or Pleasure, Twain's Summer Sojourns. And it's free and welcome to all. We will have free snacks and drinks. So please come and see the exhibit and have some snacks on us as well. No need to register. You can just show up. And on April 4th, you can join us in person or online for Dispatches from Puerto Nowhere, a story about a Puerto Rican family's efforts to assimilate that led to the near complete erasure of their heritage, culture, and language within 2 generations. And many of us are immigrants, and either we or our ancestors have gone through the same process. So it will be certainly something very interesting to see or to watch that author talk about his family's experience. So again, thank you so much, Sabrina and Donna, and thank you so much to our audience as well.
Thank you.
Have a great
Bye.
night.
Take
Good
care.
night.